Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the tight, brick-lined streets of South Philadelphia where the scent of fresh-baked bread drifts from corner bakeries and the evening light catches the stoops where old men play cards in their undershirts. Here, in a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone's business, a skinny kid with a quick grin and restless energy starts to make a name for himself. You'll hear the shuffle of shoes on cracked sidewalks, the click of dice in back alleys, and the low hum of voices swapping stories that blur the line between fact and neighborhood legend. And as we drift further into these streets, you might get the feeling that survival here isn't just about strength. It's about charm, cunning, and knowing exactly when to talk and when to stay silent. You probably won't survive this one without a little luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. He's just Joey now, not the skinny Don, not the headline figure of a dozen tabloid stories. In these early years, he's simply the wiry kid from the block, darting between street corners, learning who runs which card game, who owes who a favor, and which stores will look the other way when a boy slips an extra loaf of bread under his arm. His family is tight-knit, not wealthy, but bound by the same quiet pride that runs through many Italian-American homes here. They keep their voices low when the conversation turns to the men in sharp suits who step out of shiny Cadillacs. Even as a teenager, Joey notices how people lean in when certain names are spoken. The men who are greeted with respect in the daytime and feared after dark are the same ones who never seem to be in a hurry. He studies them without trying to. How they nod once instead of waving. How they pause before answering a question. Those pauses, Joey figures, are power. He's not the biggest kid on the street, but he learns early how to make people laugh. That grin gets him into circles he might not otherwise be welcome in. One old neighbor shakes his head and mutters that Joey's mouth will either make him a fortune or get him in trouble before he's 20. In a neighborhood where stories travel faster than buses, this becomes one of those casual prophecies people like to repeat later, as if they saw it all coming. Money is always on his mind, not in the greedy sense, but in the way a kid notices which families eat steak on Sundays and which stretch a pot of pasta for 3 days. He starts running errands for shop owners, delivering small packages, carrying messages across the neighborhood. Sometimes those errands involve stepping into smoky back rooms where a deck of cards lies spread across a table and a few bills sit under an empty glass. Nobody tells him to leave. Nobody tells him to stay either. He understands the unspoken rules. See nothing, say nothing, and keep moving. There's a certain rhythm to South Philly life, and Joey picks it up like a street musician catching a tune. He knows which stoop to avoid when tempers are high, and which alley shortcuts will get him home faster if someone's looking for trouble. He hears his mother's voice every night at the dinner table telling him to be smart, to stay away from those kinds of people. But in a place like this, those kinds of people might be your cousin's godfather, or the guy who fixed your bike chain last summer. By 16, Joey's learned how to talk his way out of a scrape. A shopkeeper accuses him of breaking something, and Joey insists it was already cracked when he picked it up. His delivery is so smooth that even the shopkeeper laughs, shaking his head. The truth might not matter as much as the way Joey sells it. On summer nights, he walks the narrow streets with his friends, their voices carrying over the hum of air conditioners sticking out of second-story windows. He's drawn to the glow of corner bars, where laughter bursts through the doors when someone inside tells a story that's just a little too good to be true. That's the thing about these streets. Facts and embellishment dance so closely that after a while, nobody bothers to separate them. In the late 70s and early 80s, the old Philadelphia mob is still casting a long shadow. Joey doesn't yet know the politics or the feuds that shaped it, but he feels the weight of its presence. He knows certain blocks where strangers are watched closely, and certain diners where the back booths are always occupied by the same faces. If you walk in and they stop talking, you walk back out. It's that simple. One evening, while leaning against the brick wall outside a deli, he sees two men pull up in a long black sedan. They step out, dressed in pale suits despite the heat, and head straight inside without glancing at anyone. Joey watches them disappear into the back, noting how the owner personally greets them with a handshake that lingers a little too long to be casual. Later, he'll think about that moment as the first time he recognized what real influence looks like. The older guys in the neighborhood take a liking to him in small, almost invisible ways. A free soda here, a nod of approval there. It's nothing overt, but in a place where relationships are everything, those tiny gestures are investments. Joey, for his part, gives them no reason to regret it. He doesn't brag, doesn't cause unnecessary trouble. And when he's asked to do something, he does it without delay. Looking back, people will say he was always destined to step deeper into that world. Many people still think that the neighborhood itself had a way of grooming its most charismatic sons for bigger things, even if those things didn't always make the Sunday papers in a flattering light. So, what do you think? Was it the place that shaped Joey, or the boy's own nature? For now, he's still just a kid on a bike, weaving through streets that feel like home, carrying messages he pretends not to understand, and catching the occasional glimpse of a life lived just out of reach. The line between his world and theirs is still intact, but thinner every day. The corners of South Philly have a language all their own, a blend of English and old country dialects, punctuated by the clink of coins and the scrape of folding chairs on cracked pavement. By the time Joey drifts into his late teens, he's fluent, not just in words, but in the pauses, the sidelong glances, and the quiet signals that say more than a full sentence ever could. He spends more time at the spots where older guys hang out, leaning against brick walls in the shade, sipping coffee that's more sugar than caffeine. They talk about sports, sure, but there's always a layer beneath, something about a truck that didn't make it to its destination, or a friend who went down to Florida for a while. Joey doesn't interrupt, doesn't ask for details, but the conversations stick in his head. One of the first to notice him is a guy named Frankie, the Hat Caruso. Nobody calls him Frankie unless they've known him since grade school. To everyone else, he's the Hat, on account of the brimmed cap he wears year-round, even in July heat. The Hat runs a couple of small-time operations, a numbers game in the back of a candy store, a few poker nights in a rented room above a garage. To Joey, he seems untouchable, not because he's dangerous, but because people treat him like a man who can make things happen with a phone call. The Hat likes Joey's sharpness, the way he picks up cues without being told. One afternoon, he hands the kid a folded envelope and tells him to drop it off 3 blocks over. No explanation, no questions. Joey delivers it without opening it, resisting the curiosity that burns in his chest. That restraint, knowing when to stay out of something, earns him a nod of approval later. Money starts to come easier, not a fortune, but enough that Joey can take his friends out for pizza without counting change. He buys himself a pair of fresh sneakers, and his mother raises an eyebrow but doesn't press. In a neighborhood where everyone hustles in one way or another, new shoes aren't necessarily a red flag. The more errands he runs, the more he learns who's connected to who. There's an invisible web stretched over the neighborhood, and Joey is slowly figuring out its knots and strands. Some names are whispered with respect, others with caution. He notices that certain people can walk into any shop and never pay a dime, while others are careful to keep their heads down when those same people pass by. One night, Joey's hanging around a street corner when a couple of older guys start ribbing him about his height. "Skinny as a broomstick," one says, tapping the ash off his cigarette. Joey fires back with a line so quick and disarming that they both laugh. That's the thing about him. Even when the joke's on him, he finds a way to flip it. A nickname sticks. Skinny. It's meant in good humor, but it also becomes a kind of brand, a word people use to point him out from across a room. By 18, he's got a little crew of his own. Not hardened criminals, just neighborhood kids with sharp haircuts and restless ambition. They pool their cash for small bets on football games, take rides to the Jersey Shore when someone's cousin can borrow a car, and hang around the fringes of real action. Joey's the one who always seems to know what's happening first. If there's a fight brewing at a bar, he hears about it before it starts. If there's a card game in a back room, he knows which door to knock on. The hat starts bringing him to social clubs, the kind with frosted glass windows and no sign out front. Inside, the air smells like cigars and espresso, and the walls are lined with framed photos of boxing champions and politicians shaking hands with men who never run for office. Joey stays quiet in these rooms, answering questions with short, polite sentences. It's not shyness, it's calculation. He's learning who laughs loudest, who drinks the slowest, who talks too much after midnight. One evening, the hat pulls him aside after a card game. "Kid," he says, "you've got ears like a bat. That's good. Just remember, bats don't talk." Joey nods, the advice sinking in deep. The streets in these years are shifting. The old bosses are fading, some to prison, some to the grave. There's a vacuum forming, and the ambitious can feel it like a change in the weather. Many people still think that this was the moment when a whole new wave of Philly players started lining up for their shot. Though whether Joey was already aiming for the top or just riding the current is still up for debate. On summer nights, the corners buzz with gossip. Someone heard about a shipment coming in at the docks. Someone else swears they saw a high-ranking guy at a South Jersey steakhouse. Joey listens, sifting rumor from possibility. He knows better than to repeat most of it. What he's learning now is patience, the art of letting information come to you instead of chasing it down. One night, as he's leaving the club, the hat walks him halfway down the block. "You're not gonna stay skinny forever, kid," he says with a half smile. "But you keep your head the way it is now, you might just stay standing longer than most." Joey doesn't answer. He just grins, the streetlight catching the edge of his face, and keeps walking into the warm night air. South Philadelphia has long memories. Even if you weren't there for the events themselves, you grow up hearing the stories, the names, the power plays, the blood spilled quietly behind closed doors. By the time Joey is easing into his 20s, the reign of Angelo Bruno has been over for years, but the imprint of that era still lingers. The gentle Don kept the city's underworld orderly in his own way, steering clear of unnecessary flash. Joey never met him, but he knows the older guys still talk about Bruno like a standard no one can quite match. In the years after Bruno's death, the city's mob landscape twisted into something messier, sharper-edged. The Scarfo era brought fear and chaos, and while Joey was still just a kid then, the ripple effects carried forward into his world. He sees the aftershocks in the way men greet each other, a little warier, a little more calculating. Power no longer feels like something stable. It's more like a chair everyone's waiting to see tipped over. Joey spends more time listening than speaking when the old heads talk. Some of them will tell you outright that the city hasn't been the same since Bruno went down. Others won't even use the man's name, like it's a superstition. And then there are the stories that carry a whiff of myth about how certain sit-downs went, who whispered what in whose ear, and which favors got traded in back rooms no outsider ever saw. Many people still think that if Bruno had lived longer, the city might have avoided the bloody carousel that followed. But that's the thing with history. You only get the version that survived the retelling. For Joey, those tales are less about nostalgia and more about a blueprint. He notes the differences between the old and new ways of doing things. Bruno's era valued diplomacy and quiet power. The Scarfo years were marked by volatility. Joey understands instinctively that surviving in this world will mean blending both, the charm that wins trust and the edge that warns people not to mistake kindness for weakness. Evenings often find him drifting through neighborhoods where the old clubs still stand, their windows clouded and their doors half hidden in the shadows. Inside, the furniture hasn't changed in decades. Heavy wooden chairs, tables scarred with the marks of endless card games, and walls heavy with the scent of cigar smoke that no fresh paint could ever erase. These rooms are where history lives, even if the men in them pretend they're only talking about tonight's ball game. One night, he sits at the bar in one of these clubs while an older soldier spins a story about a meeting Bruno supposedly had with a New York boss in the early 70s. The details are fuzzy, but the moral is clear. Know your worth, and don't let anyone from out of town tell you how to run your business. Joey tucks that lesson away like cash in an inside pocket. At home, the television hums with the nightly news. Another report on a drug bust. Another photo of men in handcuffs being led into a courthouse. Joey's mother watches with pursed lips, shaking her head, but Joey reads between the lines. Half the men on the screen are strangers to the average viewer, but to someone who knows the streets, the connections are obvious. The headlines are just the surface. The real story runs underneath. One afternoon, Joey finds himself walking past the old Bruno house. It's just a row home like any other, but in the neighborhood, it carries a kind of quiet weight. He slows his pace, glancing up at the windows, wondering what conversations those walls once held. He doesn't linger. In South Philly, standing too long in front of certain places gets you noticed. But the image stays with him. The more he learns, the more he understands that his own rise, if it comes, will have to navigate the ghosts of men like Bruno. Respect for tradition is one thing. Being trapped by it is another. He's beginning to see himself not as a follower in someone else's footsteps, but as someone charting a new route through familiar streets. Back at the club one evening, the hat nudges him during a card game. Kid, remember this. The streets don't care what the rules used to be. They only care who's playing now. Joey nods, tossing in his bet, the smoke curling upward between them. He's not yet the skinny Don in anyone's mind. But the way he's watching, listening, and filing every detail away, that's the beginning of something. The kind of beginning you only recognize later when you realize you were already walking a path you didn't even know you'd chosen. Joey's path into the deeper layers of South Philly life isn't marked by a single dramatic moment. No big score, no sudden promotion. It's more like the slow tightening of a circle, the way a kid who hangs around the edges gradually finds himself pulled into the center. It starts with a handful of friends who share his restlessness. They're not hardened men yet, just neighborhood kids with good haircuts, decent shoes, and the kind of eyes that are always scanning for opportunity. They hang around the corner in front of the pizza shop, swap rumors about which bookmaker pays out fastest, and make small wagers on Eagles games. A win means a little extra cash in the pocket. A loss means they scrape together coins for coffee and start planning the next play. Joey's natural charisma turns this loose collection into something resembling a crew. He doesn't boss them around, but when he speaks, they tend to listen. He has a way of reading situations and steering them without making anyone feel pushed. One night, when a disagreement starts boiling between two guys over a missed payment, Joey steps in with a joke and a quick change of subject, and the tension evaporates. It's a small thing, but it sticks in everyone's mind. He knows how to keep the peace without looking weak. The hat notices this too. "You've got something most guys don't," he tells Joey over a late-night coffee. "You can make people want to do what you want without them realizing it. That's dangerous, in a good way, if you're smart." By now, Joey's running small errands that carry a little more weight. It might be picking up an envelope from a dry cleaner after hours, or driving an unfamiliar car a few blocks before parking it on a side street. He never asks questions, and no one offers answers. His reward isn't just cash, it's access. The more he proves himself, the more doors open. Some of those doors lead to places most South Philly kids never see. There's a social club tucked above a bakery where the shelves in back hold more bottles of imported liquor than bread. Another sits behind an unmarked door in an apartment building, the air inside thick with cigar smoke and the faint hum of a TV tuned to a boxing match. These are the places where men talk business in half sentences, where a glance or a shrug can mean more than a paragraph. Joey pays attention to everything. Who sits closest to the door, who gets poured a drink without asking, who leaves first when the conversation turns serious. These details are currency. One winter night, he's invited to ride along with the hat and two others to Atlantic City. They aren't going for the boardwalk lights or the slot machines. This is about a quiet meeting in the back of a casino restaurant. Joey doesn't speak during the meeting, just sits and sips his coffee while older men exchange short, loaded sentences. But when they're back on the road, one of them says, "The kid listens better than most guys twice his age." In South Philly, a reputation can grow in two ways. People talk about what you've done, or they talk about what you might be capable of. Joey's name is starting to show up in the second category. Still, this isn't some fairy tale climb. There are nights when a friend ends up in trouble with a bookmaker, or when a deal falls apart and leaves people bitter. Joey learns to navigate those moments, sometimes by stepping back, sometimes by smoothing them over. He knows a bad decision here can undo months of careful work. At home, his mother keeps asking if he's working enough hours at his job, the vague term they both use for whatever he's doing now. He tells her yes, and she nods, even if she doesn't quite believe him. One evening, while walking home through the narrow, dimly lit streets, Joey catches sight of a black sedan idling at the curb. Inside are two men he's seen before at a social club. One of them lifts a hand in a slow wave. Joey returns it, then keeps walking. Moments like that carry a strange weight, the kind that makes him feel both visible and untouchable. Though he knows better than to believe in the second part, many people still think that this was when Joey began to consciously picture himself not just as a participant, but as someone who could one day call the plays. Whether that was ambition or just the natural drift of the streets, no one can say for sure. For now, he moves in and out of the neighborhood's currents with ease. Still the kid everyone calls Skinny, but with a growing sense that the nickname might one day carry a lot more meaning than a boy's frame. The hum of South Philly at night has its own music. Tires rolling slow over cobblestones, muted laughter from second-story windows, the occasional clink of a bottle in an alley. By now, Joey's ears are tuned to it. He can tell when the street is in a good mood and when something is off, when voices carry a light rhythm and when they drop to the kind of low register that signals trouble brewing. It's in this atmosphere that he starts dipping his toe into something more than errands, the gambling world. Not the neon-lit casinos down the shore, but the neighborhood operations where the action is measured in whispers and folded slips of paper. It begins with small introductions. A guy named Lenny, who runs a backroom card game above a tailor shop, tells Joey he could use an extra set of eyes on busy nights. "Nothing heavy," Lenny says. "Just keep track of who's in, who's out, and make sure no one walks with more than they should." Joey takes the gig, figuring it's better to be inside the room than out on the stoop waiting. The first night, he stands near the wall, pretending to watch the TV in the corner. In reality, he's clocking everything. The way certain players fidget when they're holding a good hand, the way Lenny taps his fingers on the table when he wants the dealer to speed up. There's a rhythm to the game that's not just about cards, it's about control. By midnight, the room smells like sweat, smoke, and tension. One guy tries to slip a chip into his jacket pocket, and Joey is on him before Lenny even notices. "Must have dropped it," Joey says smoothly, handing it back with a grin that makes it impossible for the man to push back without looking guilty. Lenny catches his eye, nodding once. That nod says more than any thank you could. Soon after, Joey finds himself making pickups for low-stakes sports bets. The operation is simple. Neighborhood guys put money on football or basketball games, and Joey makes sure the envelopes end up where they need to be. Sometimes that means climbing 3 flights of creaky stairs to knock on a door where the chain stays on until the tenant sees his face. Other times it means sliding into a booth at a corner diner, sipping coffee until a man in a windbreaker drops an envelope under the sugar shaker. The money isn't huge yet, but the network is. Every face he meets, every handshake he shares, builds a kind of map in his mind. Who's loyal? Who's greedy? Who's only in it for the thrill? That map will matter later. The hat keeps tabs on his progress without hovering. One afternoon, over a plate of sausage and peppers, he says, "Kid, you're good at making people feel like you're on their side. That's worth more than muscle in this line of work." Not everyone in the neighborhood is thrilled about Joey's rising profile. There are older guys who see him as just another flashy young buck who'll burn out or get himself pinched. One of them even warns him outright outside the corner deli. "Don't let your mouth write checks your hide can't cash," the man says, leaning in close. Joey just smiles and says, "I'm only spending what I got." But the truth is, Joey is careful. He doesn't overreach. He knows that big moves without a big base are how guys end up in the papers, or worse. For now, he's content to let people underestimate him. A turning point comes one rainy Friday night when the regular runner for a gambling spot gets picked up on a DUI. Lenny calls Joey, says he needs him to handle the drop instead. It's a bigger job, bigger money, and riskier. Joey takes it without hesitation. The exchange goes smoothly. So smoothly, in fact, that when the original runner is back on his feet, the job stays with Joey. From there, his access to the inner workings grows. He's in rooms where bigger deals are being discussed, though he still keeps quiet unless spoken to. He learns how disputes are settled, sometimes with a handshake, sometimes with a door slammed in someone's face. He notices who gets paid first when the money comes in and who has to wait. Many people still think that it was during this stretch, moving between gambling dens, making sure the right hands got greased, that Joey started shaping his future role. The streets taught him that gambling wasn't just about cards or odds. It was about managing people's expectations, keeping them happy enough to come back, and never letting them see you sweat. By the end of that winter, Joey's no longer just skinny from the corner. He's the guy you call when you need something moved quietly and without fuss, whether that something is an envelope, a message, or the kind of problem you don't put in writing. By his early 20s, Joey is already learning a lesson most men twice his age still fumble with. The street isn't just about what you can take. It's about how long you can hold it without drawing too much heat. And heat has a way of finding you, no matter how careful you think you are. His first real brush with trouble comes on a night that starts like any other. Leaning against a brick wall outside the pizza shop, a paper cup of soda in his hand, half listening to a buddy talk about a girl he's chasing. 2 patrol cars roll slow down the block, and for reasons Joey can't quite place, they stop. The officers step out, exchange a quick look, and ask Joey if he wouldn't mind answering a few questions. The questions are polite at first. Where's he been tonight? Does he know anything about a break-in a few blocks over? But Joey notices how one of the cops keeps glancing at the bulge in his jacket pocket, the envelope he's supposed to drop off later. He plays it cool, makes a joke about having the worst luck in timing, and offers to let them look inside. The envelope, of course, is empty. It's a decoy he's carrying as part of a small test from the hat. The real delivery is safe elsewhere. After a few minutes, the cops wave him off, and Joey walks away at the same steady pace he always does. Inside, though, there's a flicker of adrenaline. It's the first time he's felt the thin edge between staying free and being in a cell by midnight. Word gets back to the hat, who calls him into the club the next afternoon. "You kept your mouth shut and your story straight," the hat says, pouring him a coffee. "That's the only reason you're sitting here right now." Then he leans in and adds, "Next time, you might not get the easy version, so stay sharp." The encounter doesn't scare Joey off. If anything, it sharpens his instincts. He starts paying more attention to patterns, which streets the patrol cars like to sweep on Friday nights, which clubs the detectives loiter near. He learns that the best defense isn't a perfect cover story, but making sure you don't put yourself in a position where you'll need one. His friends notice the shift. The jokes are still there, the easy grin still lights up his face, but he's quicker to steer conversations away from certain topics in public. If someone starts talking about money that isn't theirs, he'll nudge them toward a story about last week's game instead. Even with the caution, trouble has a way of circling back. A guy Joey's known since childhood gets picked up for shoplifting and decides to tell the cops a few colorful stories about Joey's side work. Most of it is pure invention, but in this city, a rumor can stick long enough to become an unofficial truth. Two plainclothes detectives show up at Joey's mother's house one afternoon while he's out. She calls him at a payphone, her voice tight. Two men came by asking questions. Said you should stop by the station if you had a minute. Joey doesn't take the bait. He's learned enough to know that a quick chat is never quick, and rarely about what they say it is. Instead, he loops in the hat, who makes a couple of calls. A day later, the detectives have apparently moved on to other matters. Joey never hears about it again, but the message is clear. His name is on a few more lists now, and not just in the neighborhood. Many people still think that this was his first real test. Not the errands, not the card games, but the moment when he understood how thin the ice could get under his feet. Passing that test didn't just keep him in the game. It showed the older guys he had the composure for bigger things. Late one evening, walking home under the yellow streetlights, he catches his reflection in a shop window. Same lean frame, same sharp eyes. But something's shifted. The kid on the corner is still there, but layered over him now is someone else entirely. Someone who knows that every move is being watched, and every word carries weight. The men Joey learns from aren't the kind who sit you down and hand over lessons. Their teaching comes in fragments. A remark tossed over a plate of pasta, a story told half seriously during a lull in a card game, a warning slipped between two sips of espresso. In his mid-20s, Joey begins to gather these fragments into a picture. Some of the most valuable come from men who've been in the life for decades. There's Sal Two Shoes Mancini, a bookmaker with a memory like a ledger who claims he can still recall every bet from the summer of '78. Sal once tells Joey, "If a man pays you late once, he'll pay you late twice, unless you change his mind." Then there's Vinnie Marchese, who ran numbers back when they were scribbled on napkins telling him, "Always know who a man's friends are before you make him your enemy." But not every mentor is a friend. Joey also encounters the kind of rivals who pretend to offer guidance while quietly sizing him up. One such man is Tony Clocks DeSantis, named for his obsession with expensive watches. Clocks makes a point of praising Joey's quick thinking in public, then undercuts him in small ways behind closed doors, sowing doubts about his reliability, whispering that he's too flashy for his own good. Rather than confront him, Joey does what he's been learning to do: watch. He notices that Clocks has his own problems, debts to people he can't afford to anger, a temper that's cost him more than one partnership. It's a reminder that in this world, the loudest critics are often the most unstable. Through these interactions, Joey sharpens his own approach. He takes the warmth and charm from the mentors who genuinely like him, the caution from those who've survived long enough to see their friends disappear, and the quiet patience that comes from knowing rivals will often undo themselves if you give them time. The hat remains a steady influence, though his advice is never given in long speeches. One rainy afternoon, over a game of gin rummy, he tells Joey, "If you want to last, you need to know when to take the front seat and when to let someone else drive. Nobody can be in control all the time. And the ones who think they can, they don't make old bones." Sometimes the guidance is unspoken. The hat makes a habit of inviting Joey to certain meetings, even if he doesn't have a role. The rooms are filled with seasoned figures, some retired, some still active, all with histories that could fill books. Joey listens more than he talks, filing away details about how disputes are settled without a raised voice, how debts are negotiated into favors, and how the mood of a room can shift with a single phrase. There's a night when Joey gets a more practical lesson. He's sent along with an older associate to collect from a guy who's been ducking payment for weeks. The man answers the door with a mix of bravado and fear, insisting he doesn't have the cash. Joey's partner doesn't threaten him. Instead, he looks around the apartment, spots a set of golf clubs in the corner, and says, "We'll take those." The debtor protests, but within minutes, he's writing a check just to keep his property. Later, Joey realizes the point wasn't the clubs. It was showing that there are 100 ways to create urgency without crossing certain lines. Of course, not all lessons are clean. There are stories whispered after hours about people who trusted the wrong man, backed the wrong play, or believed a promise that was never going to be kept. The old-timers don't share these stories to scare him. They share them to make sure he knows the stakes. Many people still think that it was during this period, juggling mentors and rivals, absorbing advice from all sides, that Joey started to build the skill set that would later define him. Diplomacy without softness, confidence without arrogance, and a talent for making people feel they were winning, even when they weren't. By the time summer rolls around, Joey's reputation has shifted again. He's still skinny to those who've known him since boyhood, but to others, he's becoming someone whose handshake means something. And in this neighborhood, that's often the first step toward real power. By the late 80s, the aftertaste of the Scarfo era still lingers in Philadelphia like smoke that won't clear from a closed room. Joey, now sharper and more attuned to the currents beneath the surface, sees that chaos has a strange side effect. It creates openings. The city's underworld, once so rigid under Bruno, has splintered. Allegiances shift like sand, and for a young operator with charm and patience, there's room to maneuver. Older guys complain about the new way things are being run. They talk about how, under Scarfo, fear replaced respect, and how too many bodies hit the pavement for problems that could have been solved at a table over espresso. Joey listens, because beneath the grumbling, there's valuable intelligence. He's learning which men are looking for stability and which thrive in disorder. The hat tells him something important during this period. Kid, when the ground's shaking, most people look for something to grab onto. You can be that, or you can be one of the things that falls. Joey takes it to heart. The streets themselves feel different. Social clubs, once bustling every night, now keep their lights dimmed and doors locked to all but the familiar. Some corners that used to be safe to linger on now carry an edge. Too many eyes, too much paranoia. For Joey, the shift is a chance to expand quietly. He deepens ties with the gambling network, keeping it steady while others are distracted by bigger, messier plays. If a bookmaker needs muscle to collect, Joey sends someone calm but firm. If a debt can be rolled into a future favor, he allows it. Knowing that favors often pay more than cash, Atlantic City becomes a regular destination, not for the public tables, but for the rooms behind the scenes, where South Philly guys meet with out-of-towners under the guise of casino nightlife. Joey learns to blend into these spaces, suit pressed, shoes shined, smile easy. The flash is there, but it's controlled. He's noticed by the right people, and he knows it. One night, at a late dinner in a quiet spot off the boardwalk, he overhears a conversation between two older men about opportunities left on the table. The phrase sticks with him. He starts to see the city's fractured landscape not as a warning, but as a map. And he's already tracing paths other people haven't spotted yet. Still, there's danger in moving too fast. A crew from North Jersey makes a play for a piece of South Philly's sports betting action, and tensions flare. Joey isn't in charge of the negotiations. but he's in the room when they happen. He watches how the Hat keeps his tone low, how he offers just enough to avoid war without giving up anything that matters. Later, the Hat tells him, "It's not the deal you make today, it's the way it sets you up for tomorrow." Many people still think that the Scarfo-era chaos was a kind of forge for Joey. Without it, they say, he might have been just another neighborhood earner. With it, he became someone who could read instability like a weather report, spotting the calm patches where others only saw storms. By the end of the decade, his circle of contacts has grown beyond the row houses and corner stores. He's shaking hands with men who operate in different cities, even different states. Some of these introductions are arranged, others happen by chance. A seat at a bar, a shared acquaintance, a polite nod that turns into a quiet conversation. He still walks the same streets he grew up on, but now there's a subtle difference in the way people greet him. It's not just familiarity anymore. It's calculation, the unspoken question of whether being in his good graces might be worth something down the line. And Joey, always smiling, never answers that question outright. Atlantic City has its own smell, a mix of salt air, cigarette smoke, and the faint sweetness of spilled liquor baked into casino carpets. By the early 90s, Joey knows it well. The ride from South Philly is less than 2 hours, but it feels like crossing into another world, one where the lights never go out and the noise never really fades. For most people, the casinos are the main event. For Joey, they're just the cover story. The real action takes place in the spaces you don't see on postcards. The dim back hallways, the private dining rooms, the suites with curtains drawn tight even at noon. These are the meeting spots where a handshake might lead to a new partnership, or where a casual chat about a boxing match can drift into discussions about territory and percentages. Joey's charm fits the environment. In the casino lounges, he looks every bit the part. Tailored suit, polished shoes, and that easy grin that can make a stranger feel like they've known him for years. It's not just style for style's sake. It's a tool. People talk more freely to someone they think is just there for a good time. The Hat sometimes brings him along to these trips, not to speak for the crew, but to observe. The game's the same, the Hat tells him one evening as they watch dice roll across a felt table. But the stakes here can change faster than the cards. Joey starts to pick up on the unspoken hierarchy in these spaces. There are the high rollers who spend big but have no real power, the mid-level operators who control the flow of certain games, and the quiet figures in the corner who rarely play but never pay for a drink. He learns to identify which ones matter and which ones are just noise. One night, after a meeting runs late, Joey finds himself in a booth with 2 men from out of town, one from Boston, the other from Miami. The talk starts with football scores, moves to the price of certain imports, and then settles into a delicate negotiation over mutual contacts. Joey says little, just enough to keep the tone warm. Later, one of the men remarks to the Hat, "The kid's got presence. Doesn't step on toes, but you know he's there." Back in Philly, Joey's Atlantic City trips give him a kind of glow. People in the neighborhood notice when you're moving in bigger circles, even if they don't know the details. A few younger guys start trailing him the way he once trailed the older ones, hoping some of the shine will rub off. Joey doesn't mind. It's good to have eyes and ears in more places, and he's careful about who gets close. Still, he knows the casino life has its traps. A flashy win can draw attention from the wrong people, and a big loss can make you desperate. Joey plays the long game, never gambling more than he can walk away from. His real bets are the relationships he's building, not the chips on the felt. Many people still think that these Atlantic City connections were the seeds of deals that would later shape Joey's reputation in the 2000s. Whether that's true or just another layer of legend depends on who you ask. What's certain is that Joey understood something most didn't. The casino floor was a stage, but the real script was written in the rooms no one photographed. By the time summer rolls around, the trips have become routine. Joey can walk through the lobby of 3 different casinos and be greeted by name, offered a drink, or waved into a private area without a question. It's a small thing in the moment, but in this world, those small things are often the first signs of bigger doors opening. Back in South Philly, the social club is still Joey's main stage. It's not much to look at from the outside. Frosted glass windows, a plain door, no sign to hint at what's inside. But once you're through that door, you're in a room where respect is measured by how often someone refills your coffee without asking. Joey has learned to treat the club like a second home, though he never forgets it's also an arena. The men here come to play cards, share meals, and trade information. But under it all, the hierarchy is as real as any boardroom. Where you sit matters. Who you sit with matters more. He has a knack for moving between groups without seeming to choose sides. He can spend 1 hour leaning on the bar, trading sports talk with bookmakers, then cross the room to share a quiet laugh with an old-timer who hasn't rolled dice in 20 years, but still gets invited to every meeting. That ability to shift gears is one reason the older guys keep him close. Sometimes the club is loud, laughter spilling over from a winning hand, or a joke that's been told 100 times but still lands. Other nights, the room is hushed, the TVs sound low, and every conversation feels like it could tilt into business. Joey reads the mood instantly. If it's a night for small talk, he tells a story about a wild night in Atlantic City. If it's a night for serious tones, he keeps his words clipped and his ears open. One evening, a small dispute flares between 2 men over a delayed payment. It's nothing violent, just voices getting sharper than they should. Joey steps in, not with authority, but with timing. He slides between them, offers to cover part of the debt temporarily, and reframes the argument, so it's about a miscommunication rather than disrespect. Both men walk away still talking, but calmer. By the end of the week, the payment is settled, and both remember that Joey was the one who kept it from getting ugly. The hat later tells him, "You can make money 100 ways, kid, but you can only make loyalty one way, by showing up when it matters." Joey also learns that the club isn't just for socializing. It's a filter. People come in to prove themselves, to test how they're received, to send messages without saying them outright. A man's greeting can be as telling as his handshake. Too firm, and he's trying too hard. Too soft, and he's not confident enough. Joey watches it all, storing details the way a card counter keeps mental tallies. On slow afternoons, he'll sit by the window, sipping espresso and watching the street. He notices who walks by without looking in, and who lingers just long enough to see who's inside. Sometimes, a man will catch his eye and nod. Other times, he'll pretend not to see. In a neighborhood like this, acknowledging someone is a kind of currency. Many people still think that Joey's real power didn't come from the deals he made or the money he earned, but from the way he positioned himself in rooms like this. Never the loudest, never the most visible, but always within arm's reach of the real decisions. By the late 90s, his presence at the club is expected. If he's not there, people notice. And when people notice you're absent, it means they've already gotten used to you being in the center of things. even if you never once called yourself the boss. By the time the new millennium edges closer, Joey has grown into a role that no one officially names, but everyone quietly acknowledges. The local press has already started to take interest, drawn by his combination of flash and familiarity. They like the way he looks in a suit, the way he talks to reporters like they're old friends, and the fact that, unlike many in his world, he doesn't shy from the camera. It's this blend of neighborhood charm and public ease that earns him the nickname that will follow him for decades, the Skinny Don. It starts as a throwaway line in a column, half joking, but it sticks. Soon, even people who've never met him are using it, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with suspicion. Joey doesn't fight it. If anything, he leans into it, knowing that a name like that can work for you if you handle it right. The media attention isn't just about his style. They're fascinated by how he seems to be everywhere without ever being caught doing anything illegal. He's at charity events, posing for photos with local business owners. He's spotted at high-end restaurants in Center City, walking out with people the papers call known associates. Yet when law enforcement is asked for comment, they admit they can't pin anything specific on him. In the clubs and on the corners, the nickname becomes both a badge and a warning. Friends use it with a smile. Rivals use it with a shrug that says, "We'll see how long he stays skinny." But Joey understands that public image can be armor. As long as he controls the version of himself that people see, he can buy time and space for the version they don't. One warm spring night, Joey is at a restaurant on Passyunk Avenue, sharing dinner with three men whose combined street influence could sway half the city. A local reporter happens to be eating 2 tables over. The next day, the paper runs a photo snapped on a phone, Joey laughing, wine glass in hand, with the headline, "The Skinny Don Dines in Style." The article is pure speculation, but it does the work for him. The image is now cemented. Not everyone in the life appreciates the attention. An older figure pulls Joey aside one evening at the club and says, "Kid, the cameras are like the sun. You stand in them too long, they'll burn you." Joey nods, but he also knows the value of a little light. It keeps people guessing, and guessing keeps them cautious. He starts playing the dual role more deliberately. By day, he's visible enough to maintain his image, attending community fundraisers, shaking hands at local events, smiling for the occasional photo. By night, he moves with more care, keeping meetings small and private, making sure the real business never touches the surface. Many people still think that this was the moment Joey's rise became inevitable. The nickname, the press attention, the careful balance between being seen and staying untouchable, it all worked together to make him more than just another South Philly figure. He was becoming a brand, one that could travel beyond the neighborhood without losing its roots. By the end of the year, the Skinny Don isn't just a label. It's shorthand for a man who can walk into almost any room in the city and be greeted like he belongs there. And in his world, that's worth as much as any envelope. Public image might win attention, but Joey knows it's the work behind closed doors that keeps a crew running. As the 2000s settle in, he's juggling both: a face the neighborhood recognizes instantly, and a set of operations that only a handful of trusted people see clearly. The challenge is keeping those two worlds from touching in ways that can't be explained away. The gambling rackets are humming. Sports betting, especially, is growing with the rise of online odds and out-of-state contacts. Joey doesn't sit at a desk taking bets. He leaves that to others. But the lines all trace back to him. A bookmaker in South Jersey might be paying a cut to a man Joey grew up with. A card game in a back room in Delaware County might be supplied with cash and security from one of Joey's guys. The numbers don't pass through Joey's hands directly, but the profits find their way back. He also starts leaning into loan sharking, not the kind that makes the papers with broken bones and police raids, but a slower, quieter business. A man needs money to keep his bar afloat? Joey's guy fronts it with terms that sound generous until the deadlines start to stack. Most pay without trouble, not because they fear a beating, but because they know losing Joey's goodwill costs more than the loan itself. One thing Joey has learned from watching older bosses stumble is that too many moving parts draw heat. He streamlines his circle, keeping only the most reliable earners close. Some friends from his youth get cut out, not because of betrayal, but because they can't keep their mouths shut. Loose talk sinks more ships than bullets, the hat tells him one afternoon over lunch. Joey's seen enough to know it's true. In the social club, his presence is now an anchor. Younger guys drift toward him the way they once did toward his mentors. He doesn't give orders in the open, but a casual remark from Joey can set off a chain of events that everyone understands without needing it spelled out. Even with the careful approach, law enforcement starts sniffing around. Surveillance vans appear a few blocks away from certain meetings. A friend warns him about a wiretap on a phone line he's been using. Joey adapts quickly, moving conversations to in-person only, using locations where he can see every angle of the street. There's an evening when he's driving back from Atlantic City, and headlights appear in the mirror, holding steady for miles. Joey doesn't panic. He takes 3 extra turns before pulling into a crowded diner lot. When the car follows, he steps out and walks inside without looking back. Whoever's trailing him leaves after 10 minutes. In this line of work, paranoia isn't a weakness, it's insurance. Many people still think that. During these years, Joey perfected the balance between visibility and control. The press could speculate, rivals could guess, and law enforcement could follow. But none of them could pin anything down. By the mid-2000s, the Skinny Don name is no longer just local slang. You hear it whispered in other cities, in other clubs. And Joey, who started as a kid running errands for envelopes, now moves like a man who's been at the table for years. Because he has. Joey's world in the mid-2000s is a carefully balanced table, and every seat matters. By now, he's woven a network that stretches beyond South Philly. Not sprawling, but deliberate, like a net with no frayed edges. Every contact has a purpose, every handshake a weight. He's not the kind to brag about reach, but if you trace certain money trails, his name comes up more than once. Friends in low places are part of the picture. The bookmakers, the card dealers, the guys who can get a message from one end of the city to the other in an hour without a phone call. But Joey also knows the value of friends in higher spots. A councilman who owes a favor, a small-time contractor who suddenly lands bigger jobs, a restaurant owner who always has a table ready. None of these relationships are loud. They're built quietly, in dinners and donations, in polite check-ins that feel social, but are anything but casual. He's learned that politics and the street share the same basic rule. People help those who can help them back. So when a charity event needs a last-minute sponsor, Joey's name appears on the banner. When a youth sports league needs new uniforms, a box shows up anonymously. The kids' parents don't ask questions, but they remember. And memories, in his world, are a kind of currency. The hat still offers advice, though less like a mentor now and more like a trusted equal. One afternoon, over espresso in the corner booth, he tells Joey, The higher you go, the softer your voice has to get. Shouting makes people think you're trying to prove something. Whispering makes them lean in. Joey takes the words to heart. Not all connections are about warmth. Some are chess moves, like meeting with an old rival's associate just to signal that lines are shifting. Other times, it's about preventing trouble before it starts. A quiet sit-down with a restless crew from another neighborhood to make sure they understand where the boundaries are. And then, there are the favors that look small, but carry weight. A friend of a friend's son gets into a scrape after hours. Joey makes a call, and the problem disappears. The boy's father never forgets it. Years later, that same man will connect Joey with someone who has information worth far more than the original favor. Many people still think that this was the stage where Joey stopped being just a neighborhood figure and started playing on a board that spanned multiple cities. Not because he declared himself anything, but because he moved like someone who could open doors most people didn't even know existed. Late at night, walking through the quieter streets, he sometimes thinks about the years it took to get here. He still passes the stoops where he once leaned as a teenager, still hears the same hum of conversation from corner bars. But now, when people nod at him from those doorways, it's not just recognition, it's calculation. They're wondering not just who Joey is, but what he might be able to do for them, or to them. And Joey, with that familiar half-smile, never answers that question out loud. By the mid-2000s, Joey's rackets have matured into a steady, layered operation. The sports betting arm hums through football season, smooth enough that even losing bettors keep coming back. Loan collections move quietly, without broken doors or public scenes, because Joey knows the best way to keep a business alive is to avoid making it look like one. And every new deal he touches seems to fold neatly into the old ones, as if the whole network has been built to grow without showing strain. Sports betting remains the jewel in the crown. The neighborhood bookies keep their lists on paper, but the odds they work from are coming in from far outside Philly. Updates funneled through contacts in Vegas, in Jersey, even one or two down in Miami. Joey doesn't need to be the man placing the numbers. He's the one ensuring that when money moves, it passes through safe hands. That means smoothing over disputes before they turn to threats, making sure everyone in the chain gets just enough to keep them loyal, and keeping the police guessing about where the center of gravity really is. The loans are different. They're built on patience. A man borrows $5,000 to cover a slow month at his bar. Joey's guy gives him terms that sound almost generous. Low weekly payments, no pressure. But miss 2 weeks, and the rate ticks up. Another week, and Joey is there in person, not to intimidate, but to remind him how important it is to keep certain arrangements in good standing. Often the debtor will find the money before the conversation is over. One of Joey's smartest moves in these years is diversifying the people who work for him. He keeps some old friends from the street days, but mixes in a few older hands, men with calmer tempers, cleaner records, and reputations for getting things done without drama. That balance helps him keep the operation steady while avoiding the flashpoints that took down other crews. Law enforcement attention hasn't gone away. If anything, it's gotten sharper. Now, instead of local cops on the beat, there are federal agents occasionally parked a block or two from the club, jotting down plate numbers. Joey never gives them a reason to step closer. When meetings happen, they happen in motion. A walk through the Italian market, a quick coffee on a busy sidewalk, a shared cigarette at a corner where cars can't park. It's in this period, that Joey also strengthens his hold on certain backroom games. In a few bars across South Philly, the card tables are his in all but name. He makes sure the dealers get their cut, the house takes its share, and disputes are settled before anyone gets the urge to call in muscle. The quiet, smooth-running games are good for business. They keep cash flowing without attracting noise. Many people still think that this was the era when Joey's operation became a model for how to run things without ending up in handcuffs every other year. It wasn't that he was invisible, far from it, but that he knew exactly when to be seen and when to vanish. One rainy night, leaving a backroom game on Passyunk, Joey pulls up his collar against the drizzle and walks alone toward his car. A couple of younger guys watch from across the street, whispering his name. He doesn't acknowledge them, but he catches their eyes just long enough for them to know he noticed. In this business, a glance can say more than a conversation, and Joey's glance says he's aware of everything, even when it looks like he's just walking home. By the mid-2000s, the quiet hum of Joey's operation has settled into a rhythm that feels almost unshakable. The gambling lines keep flowing, the loan payments come in on time more often than not, and the neighborhood sees him as both a figure of influence and a man you can still shake hands with on the street. But with steady success comes a different kind of pressure, the slow, steady gaze of law enforcement that never seems to blink. The feds are patient hunters. They don't kick down doors without a reason. They wait, they watch, they collect. Joey knows this. He's seen enough men undone by the weight of cases built inch by inch. In these years, he moves like a man playing chess, always a few squares ahead, always thinking about what might be 3 moves away. Surveillance isn't just a risk, it's a reality. He spots familiar cars more than once on his routes. Sometimes he'll change his schedule entirely on a whim, canceling a meeting or showing up at a different club just to muddy the trail. Other times, he'll walk an extra block past his destination before circling back, catching a glimpse in a shop window to see who's behind him. Inside the social club, the conversations grow tighter. Phones are rarely used, and when they are, they stick to talk about family, sports, or dinner plans. Business is handled face-to-face, in places where noise and movement make it harder for a stray microphone to catch the details. A turning point comes when Joey hears, through one of those whispers that only travel in trusted circles, that an old acquaintance has been talking too much in a federal interview room. Not directly about Joey, but about operations close enough to send a ripple. Joey doesn't make a scene. He simply removes that man from any chain of contact. No explanations, no drama. It's not personal, it's survival. The hat reminds him, over a late-night espresso. It's not the trouble you see coming that gets you. It's the trouble you let too close because you thought it wouldn't bite. Joey nods. He's seen enough to know it's true. Still, he doesn't let the heat change his demeanor in public. At charity events, he's warm and open, shaking hands with locals, smiling for photos. If anything, the attention makes him double down on his community image. The contrast is deliberate. The man the papers write about as a fixture of South Philly's cultural scene doesn't fit neatly into the picture of a mob target. Many people still think that this balancing act, being the visible good neighbor while operating a network just under the radar, was Joey's most impressive skill. He didn't vanish when the heat rose. He made the heat part of the scenery. And yet, even in these careful years, the air is never completely calm. There's always the possibility that someone's wearing a wire, that a conversation will surface in court months later, stripped of tone and context. Joey lives with that possibility the way most people live with the weather. Unavoidable, but manageable if you plan your day right. As summer turns to fall, the city feels smaller in a way. The old faces at the club are fewer, the new ones hungrier. And Joey, walking through those familiar doors each evening, knows that every move is part of a longer game, one he's determined to keep playing on his terms. The trial had been building for years, a slow burn case pieced together from wiretaps, informants, and financial records that didn't quite add up in the way the feds hoped they would. When Joey's name finally appeared in the headlines beside the words "Federal Indictment," South Philly reacted in two ways. Half the neighborhood muttered that it was only a matter of time, and the other half shook their heads, saying the feds were chasing a story they couldn't prove. Joey took the news like a man pulling on a familiar coat. This wasn't his first time in a courtroom, and he knew the rules. Keep your voice steady. Keep your face calm. Never let them see you rattled. The charges were serious: racketeering, gambling, and a scattering of counts designed to paint a picture rather than nail down specifics. The press loved it. "Skinny Don faces federal heat," one paper blared. Joey didn't give them the satisfaction of a quote. In the weeks before the trial, the social club felt like a place under siege. Friends still came by, but conversations leaned on small talk. Everyone knew the phones were probably being monitored, maybe even the room itself. The Hat stayed close during this time, his quiet presence as steady as it had been when Joey was just the kid on the corner. "You get through this," he told Joey one night, "and you don't just walk out clean. You walk out with twice the reputation." Court was its own theater. Prosecutors painted Joey as the hub of an illegal empire, a man who used charm and fear in equal measure to control sports betting and loan sharking across the city. They rolled out photos, audio snippets, and the testimony of men whose loyalty had been bought and sold in the back rooms of plea deals. Joey's defense chipped away at each piece, pointing out the gaps, the assumptions, the maybes disguised as facts. Through it all, Joey sat at the defense table in tailored suits, leaning slightly forward, expression neutral. To the jury, he was a man listening intently. To the reporters in the gallery, he was the picture of composure. To those who knew him best, he was doing exactly what he'd always done, controlling the room without saying a word. The trial stretched for weeks, the tension rising with each witness. Outside the courthouse, cameras caught glimpses of Joey arriving, sometimes with family, sometimes with a small entourage. He never ducked his head, never hid behind sunglasses. If the press wanted a picture, he made sure it was one he could live with. Many people still think that this trial was the real turning point, not because of the verdict itself, but because it showed how far Joey's name had traveled. This wasn't just a South Philly story anymore. The whole country was reading about the skinny Don who might walk away from federal charges. When the jury finally returned, the verdict was a mix. Guilty on some lesser counts, not guilty on the charges that could have kept him behind bars for decades. Joey accepted the outcome with the same calm he'd shown throughout. A few years inside? Yes. But not the endgame his enemies had hoped for. As marshals led him out of the courtroom, he glanced briefly toward the gallery where a handful of familiar faces sat. No nod, no wave, just that quick, knowing look. The kind that says the game isn't over, only paused. Prison is a world with its own rules, but Joey walks in already knowing how to read a room, and that skill serves him just as well inside as it did on the streets of South Philly. The first week is all about observation: who eats where, who plays cards with who runs the yard quietly, and who tries to run it loud. He keeps his head down at first, not out of fear, but to take the measure of things. There's no rush to make allies, and no need to impress anyone. Those who know his name already know his story, and those who don't will figure it out soon enough. The feds might have put him inside, but they didn't strip away the habits that kept him standing. He stays in shape, keeps a clean routine, and never lets frustration leak into his face or voice. In here, respect is as much about how you carry yourself as it is about what you've done. It doesn't take long for word to spread. Guys from Philly approach him, some old acquaintances, others who just want to be in the same orbit. A few from other cities nod as he passes in the yard, recognition without words. The fact that his name has traveled this far reinforces something he's always understood. Image and presence can cross walls. The prison economy runs on favors, trades, and unspoken understandings. Joey doesn't run games or hustle cigarettes. He doesn't need to. His role is subtler. He becomes a middleman for conversations between people who wouldn't otherwise sit at the same table. He knows how to smooth over small disputes before they boil over, and that earns him quiet respect from both inmates and certain staff who appreciate the lowered tension. Letters from home are steady. Friends send updates about the streets, carefully worded in case they're read by eyes they weren't meant for. Family sends warm notes and news about the neighborhood, small details about the corner bakery, or the changing leaves that keep him connected to the outside world. There's a night, a few months in, when Joey sits on his bunk after lights out, listening to the low hum of the unit. A younger guy in the cell across from him whispers, "How do you stay so calm?" Joey thinks for a second before answering softly, "You don't win by rushing. You win by lasting." It's advice for prison, but also for life on the street. Many people still think that his time inside only sharpened his patience. Instead of stepping back from the game, he used the years to refine how he would move when the doors opened again. In the final stretch of his sentence, Joey keeps his focus forward. He avoids getting pulled into trouble that could extend his time. Every day is another square on the calendar, marked off with quiet discipline. When the release date finally comes, he walks out the same way he walked in, steady, measured, no unnecessary show. The air outside feels different, like the streets themselves are leaning in to see what the skinny dawn will do next. The first days back on the street are a mix of familiarity and quiet adjustment. South Philly still looks like South Philly. The same narrow blocks, the same corner bars with their weathered awnings, the same smell of bread drifting from the bakeries in the morning. But Joey notices the smaller changes. A few of the old faces at the social club are gone. Some of the storefronts have new names. There's a different rhythm in the way people greet him. Respect still there, but now laced with curiosity about what comes next. He doesn't rush back into business. That would be too obvious, too easy for the people who've been watching his release on a calendar. Instead, he keeps his public moves light. Lunch at a popular spot on Passyunk Avenue. A quiet drink at a bar where everyone knows his name. Stopping by a charity dinner and shaking hands with locals. Every appearance is casual on the surface, but each one is a signal. The skinny Don is back, and he's still moving comfortably in all the right circles. Behind the scenes, he starts feeling out the landscape. Some of the old players have shifted alliances. Younger crews are testing their reach, and a few are already whispering about taking bigger slices of territory. Joey watches without rushing to plant a flag. He knows the quickest way to burn out is to move before you understand the board. The hat, older now but still sharp, welcomes him back with the same understated warmth he always has. "Things change while you're away," he says one night over espresso. "Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. The trick is knowing which is which before you take a step." Joey spends weeks walking the neighborhoods, talking to people who owe him no favors but still lean in when he speaks. He asks questions that sound like small talk, but are really about measuring loyalty, ambition, and trouble. The responses tell him what he needs to know: who's hungry, who's restless, and who's ready to deal. Many people still think that this period was Joey at his most dangerous, not because he was making bold plays, but because he wasn't. Restraint in this life is rarer than greed, and those who mistook his patience for weakness often found out too late they'd read him wrong. He's careful with his movements, but one thing is clear: his absence hasn't erased his name. If anything, it's given it a sharper edge. The stories people tell about him from before, the trial, the clubs, the Atlantic City trips, have been burnished in his absence, taking on a glow that's half truth, half legend. As autumn settles in, Joey walks down a block where every stoop holds someone watching the street. A man in a folding chair nods as Joey passes and says, "Good to see you back." Joey gives that small grin, the one people remember from years ago, and keeps walking. He doesn't need to say anything more. The message is already out there. Old grudges don't fade just because time has passed. If anything, the years can sharpen them, sanding away the noise until only the resentment remains. Joey knows this, and as he slips back into the current of South Philly life, he can feel certain eyes on him, the kind that don't just watch, but measure. Some of these grudges are personal, born from deals that went sour or slights never forgiven. Others are inherited, the byproducts of old alliances and rivalries that existed before Joey ever had a seat at the table. In this world, you can be held responsible for the moves of a man you barely knew, simply because you now occupy his space. One evening, at the back of a dimly lit bar, a familiar face from years ago slides into the booth across from Joey. The man's smile is polite, but the words carry a chill. "You know, some people think you walked back into a world that's the same as when you left. They're wrong." Joey nods slowly, stirring the ice in his glass. "Then I guess it's up to me to learn the new rules," he says, his voice steady. Some tensions are quieter, but no less real. A couple of younger crews, emboldened by Joey's absence, have taken liberties. Small cuts into gambling territory, subtle changes to how certain debts are collected. Joey doesn't strike back immediately. Instead, he notes each one, filing them away like lines on a ledger. Retaliation will come, but not until the timing makes it count. The hat warns him about one crew in particular, old school guys with deep grudges against anyone tied to the hat's generation. "They don't see you as Joey," he says. "They see you as my shadow." Joey smiles faintly. "Then maybe I'll let them look until they start seeing something else." Many people still think that this was the period when Joey showed his most strategic side. Instead of charging into old rivalries head-on, he reshaped them, turning potential enemies into quiet allies, or at least into people too unsure to make the first move. It starts with small gestures, showing up at a rival's favorite spot and buying a round for the whole table, sending a message through a mutual contact that a disputed debt is forgiven. None of these moves erase the tension, but they shift the ground just enough to keep things from erupting. Of course, not every grudge can be smoothed over. there are still conversations happening in back rooms where his name is mentioned alongside plans that end badly. Joey knows this, and he treats it the same way he treated prison, by staying aware, staying steady, and making sure the first real move belongs to him. One cold night, walking down a narrow street toward his car, Joey catches the faint reflection of someone lingering in a doorway. He doesn't break stride, doesn't look twice, but as he drives away, he makes a mental note of the building, the time, the weather, because in his world, details aren't just memories, they're ammunition. Las Vegas isn't new to Joey. He's been before, years back, for the kind of meetings that happen far from the slot machines. But this time, the city feels different. Maybe it's the way the strip has grown, glitter stacked on glitter. Or maybe it's because he's walking into it with a wider reach than he had before. Either way, he's here for more than sightseeing. On paper, the trip is harmless. A couple of old friends meeting for dinners, catching a fight, maybe playing a little blackjack. In reality, it's a quiet tour of introductions, casino hosts, local bookmakers, and a few out-of-town operators who happen to be in the same place at the same time. The meetings aren't long, but they're carefully placed, each one seeding a connection that might be useful months or years down the road. Vegas business is a different animal. In South Philly, everyone knows who you are before you walk into the room. Here, introductions can be theater. A man you've never met before might know your nickname, your history, and the color of your car. But he'll act like it's your first handshake. Joey plays along, smiling easily, never rushing to show his cards. One evening, in a quiet steakhouse away from the strip's noise, Joey sits across from a man who runs sports action out west. The talk drifts from NFL lines to the way online betting has shifted the game. Joey listens more than he speaks, offering just enough to keep the other man leaning in. When the check comes, they split it without ceremony, both knowing the value exchanged wasn't on the bill. The hat had once told him, "When you're far from home, you're either a guest or a problem. Be the kind of guest they want to invite back." Joey carries that advice into every room. He leaves each meeting with a firm handshake, a shared laugh, and an open door for whatever comes next. Back in Philly, the trip's ripple effect starts quietly. A few new contacts pass word through mutual friends. Small opportunities appear in markets he hasn't touched before. Nothing loud, nothing that would make headlines, just the slow spread of influence, the way roots grow under pavement. Many people still think that Vegas was where Joey began to think beyond the city's borders in a serious way, not as an empire builder chasing every opportunity, but as someone who knew the value of planting seeds in different soils. One night, walking down the strip with the neon glow bouncing off his suit, Joey pauses to watch a crowd gathered around a street magician. The trick is good, but Joey's eyes are on the way the man controls the attention, guiding it exactly where he wants. It's not so different from the life Joey lives. The game is making sure people see what you want them to see, and nothing more. When he boards the plane home, it's without souvenirs or snapshots. The real takeaway is tucked in his phone book and in his memory. New names, new numbers, and the beginnings of conversations that haven't happened yet. For all his reach and the stories told about him, Joey has always understood the power of image. Not just the headlines, but the way people see him in the small, quiet moments. In the mid-2000s, he begins leaning more deliberately into the family man picture. It's not an act. Joey genuinely spends time with his wife and daughters, showing up for dinners, school events, and quiet weekends. But he also knows the way these appearances play in the neighborhood. When people see the skinny Don laughing over pasta with his kids, it blurs the sharper edges of his reputation. It makes him relatable in a way no press release could. At charity events, he's often photographed in tailored suits with his family at his side, smiling for local papers that call him a South Philadelphia businessman and community supporter. These clippings go on refrigerators and bulletin boards, softening the perception of a man the feds still quietly track. In the social club, he doesn't talk much about home life. That's off limits. But the younger guys notice that he leaves early some nights, heading home instead of staying until closing. It adds to the sense that he's not just chasing the next score. He's living a life outside the street. That makes him harder to read and, in some ways, harder to target. The hat teases him once, saying, "You're making us all look bad with this devoted husband thing." Joey grins and says, "Maybe it's just the one racket no one's figured out how to beat me at. Still, the balance isn't without risk. A family can be a strength, but it can also be a pressure point." Joey knows this, and he's careful, never letting business spill into the spaces meant for his wife and kids, never taking calls at the dinner table, never bringing certain company to his home. Many people still think that his family man image was one of the smartest shields he ever carried. Prosecutors could try to paint him as a criminal, but juries and the public would remember the photographs of him at Little League games and neighborhood fundraisers. By the time the decade moves into its latter years, Joey's public life and private operations are running in parallel, separate tracks that only cross when he allows them to. And in a world where so many fall because they let one bleed into the other, that separation might be his sharpest survival skill yet. The media's fascination with Joey has only grown over the years. Reporters know his name sells papers and draws clicks, even when the stories are stitched together from speculation and recycled quotes. For Joey, the attention is both a nuisance and a tool. Dangerous if you let it get too close. Useful if you learn how to shape it. He never gives interviews, but he's not camera shy. If someone with a press badge catches him leaving a restaurant, he might offer a quick smile, maybe a light remark about the weather, before sliding into his car. The exchange lasts seconds, but it's enough to keep his image in the public's mind. Stylish, calm, unbothered. Some reporters try to dig deeper, chasing rumors about his gambling operations or his connections to other cities. They call old acquaintances, sift through court records, even hang around the social club hoping for a photo. Joey never takes the bait. He knows that silence is often louder than a denial. The hat gives him a reminder one afternoon over coffee. They're not after the truth. They're after the version of you that sells best. Let 'em have the one you can live with. Joey already understands this. He keeps the public version of himself clean enough to pass a casual glance, while the real work stays buried under layers of distance and trusted hands. There's a story that runs in a major paper one summer, painting Joey as a modern throwback, a man who blends old-school neighborhood ties with a polished, almost corporate style of leadership. The piece doesn't accuse him of crimes. It hints. Joey reads it once, folds the paper, and sets it aside. The next night, he's photographed at a charity auction, bidding on a signed baseball for a youth program. The contrast is deliberate, and the public eats it up. Many people still think that Joey's handling of the press was as much a part of his power as any deal he made. By controlling what they saw, he controlled what they could print, and by keeping them chasing the image, he kept them away from the substance. At the club, the younger guys sometimes joke about the articles, reading them aloud in exaggerated voices. Joey just smiles. He knows better than to believe his own headlines, but he also knows headlines can be armor if you wear them right. By the time autumn comes, another story hits the papers. This one about federal attention circling again. Joey doesn't react. He keeps his nights the same. Dinners, quiet meetings, a few late games of cards. If the feds want a picture of him, they'll get one. Just not the picture they think they're taking. By the late 2000s, Joey's name is back in the headlines, this time tied to a new set of indictments. Federal prosecutors frame it as a sweeping case against organized crime in Philadelphia, listing charges from gambling to extortion. The details are broad enough to cast a wide net, but sharp enough to get attention. Reporters call it a chance for the government to finally clip the skinny Don's wings. Inside the social club, the mood tightens. Conversations grow shorter, visits less frequent. Everyone knows the walls have ears, and the safest thing to say is nothing. Joey carries himself the same way he always has. Calm, measured, never letting the tension show. To the younger guys, it's a lesson. Panic makes you sloppy, and sloppy gets you buried. The hat warns him, this isn't about what they can prove. It's about what they can make people believe. Joey nods. He's been here before. The difference now is that the stakes are higher, the coverage louder, and the cast of characters bigger. In court, prosecutors work to paint a picture of a man at the center of a vast criminal web. They call witnesses who speak in half-truths, padded with stories that make for better headlines than testimony. Some admit they haven't seen Joey handle a bet or collect a payment in years. Others claim he gives orders through layers of intermediaries. The case is built as much on perception as on evidence. The defense counters by poking holes in the narrative, pointing out contradictions, questioning motives. More than once, the jury hears about plea deals, about how certain witnesses suddenly remember details after being offered lighter sentences. Joey sits quietly through it all, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth when a story starts to collapse under cross-examination. Outside the courthouse, cameras catch him walking in each morning. Sometimes he's alone, sometimes with family, sometimes with a friend or two. The images feed the cycle. Every photo keeps his name in circulation, and every article keeps the legend alive, whether the words are meant to praise or condemn. Many people still think that this trial was less about conviction and more about disruption. Even without a heavy sentence, the government's aim was to slow Joey down, to shake his network, to make people second-guess doing business with him. When the verdict comes, it's another split. Guilty on some counts, not guilty on others. The time he faces is real, but not the decades prosecutors hoped for. As he's let out, Joey glances toward the press section and gives a brief, almost imperceptible nod. A signal, maybe, that the story isn't over. Back in the neighborhood, the reactions are mixed. Some see the outcome as a win, proof that the skinny Don can't be cornered. Others think the years ahead will test whether his influence can survive distance. Joey doesn't argue either way. He knows the only opinion that matters is the one he writes himself when he's back on the street. Prison. The second time around feels different. Joey walks in with the experience of a man who's been through it before, but also with the weight of knowing the government will be watching even more closely when he gets out. The first stretch inside had been about observation and patience. This one is about preservation, keeping his network intact while serving his time without giving anyone an easy target. He keeps his routine tight. Morning workouts, meals with a small circle, afternoons spent reading or walking laps in the yard. The faces in here are a mix. A few he knows from years past, some fresh ones with something to prove, and a handful of older inmates who just want to finish their time in peace. Joey fits into the last group, but he carries enough presence that the younger guys don't test him. Communication with the outside world is deliberate. Every letter, every phone call is filtered through the awareness that someone else is reading or listening. He talks to family about simple things: food, weather, birthdays, and to trusted friends about nothing that could be twisted into evidence. If something important needs to be said, it's said in person during visits, and even then, in half sentences that only make full sense once you know the missing words. The time moves in a slow, steady rhythm. Joey uses it to think, not just about the next steps when he's out, but about the changes already underway on the outside. Crews shift. New faces come up. Some people vanish, either by choice, by trouble, or by turning. It's the nature of the life, and Joey knows better than to expect the streets to stay frozen until he returns. There's one younger inmate from another city who takes to sitting with Joey at lunch. At first, it's just talk about sports, but over weeks, it shifts to questions about how you make it without burning out. Joey answers sparingly. You learn to pass on things that look too easy. Easy's what they use to set you up. The kid nods like he's heard it before, but from the way he keeps showing up, Joey figures he hadn't really listened until now. Many people still think that these years were where Joey's influence became more subtle, less about being in the middle of the action, more about knowing who to guide, who to avoid, and when to let the game play without his hand on the table. When release day finally comes, there's no fanfare. Joey steps out in a plain jacket, a bag over his shoulder, and a look that doesn't give away whether he's walking into a fight or a fresh start. The streets have changed again. They always do. But he's still Joey Merlino, and the name still carries enough weight to make people look twice when they hear it. Freedom. The second time feels less like a burst of air and more like stepping into a room you've been peeking at through a keyhole for years. The streets are busier, louder, faster, but under the noise, the same old rules still hum. Respect matters. Loyalty is currency. And timing is everything. Joey doesn't race to reclaim ground. That would be too easy for the feds to frame as proof that prison hadn't changed him. Instead, he works in shadows and half light. The first weeks are filled with small moves. A dinner here, a quiet drink there, a handshake at a wedding or a christening. Every appearance is calculated, every conversation short enough to leave no trail, but long enough to plant a seed. The neighborhood welcomes him back with the same blend of warmth and watchfulness. Some people embrace him openly, relieved to see the skinny Don walking the blocks again. Others study him from doorways, measuring whether the man in front of them is the same one who left. Joey offers each the same steady smile. Let them wonder. He spends afternoons driving through old routes, noting what's changed and what hasn't. Certain corners feel emptier without the faces he used to see. A few bars he once favored have closed, replaced by coffee shops and boutiques. Still, there are places where the air feels the same. The back rooms, the side streets, the stoops where the right people still sit when the weather's good. Opportunities present themselves quietly. A bookmaker who's been squeezed by a rival offers to shift his action under Joey's umbrella. An old contact from Atlantic City reaches out about a possible arrangement. Joey listens, weighs, and only moves when the risk and reward align. There's no hurry. In his world, a fast move is often the one you regret. Many people still think that his restraint during this stretch was proof he'd evolved beyond the impulsive plays that sink others. Whether it was wisdom, caution, or just the understanding that the feds were still watching every step, Joey operated like a man who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. As months pass, the press checks in occasionally, still curious about what he's doing. Joey gives them nothing. No quotes, no slips, just the occasional public sighting at a fundraiser or a family event. The headlines become less frequent, but the legend doesn't fade. If anything, the absence of new stories keeps the old ones alive, and at night, when the noise of the city softens, Joey walks the narrow South Philly streets where he first learned the rhythms of the life. The same brick walls, the same dim streetlights, the same quiet that settles after the bars close. The game has changed in ways large and small, but he's still here, not because he's clung to the past, but because he's learned how to bend with the present without breaking. So, as the night thins and the streets fall into that gentle, late-hour hush, picture those narrow South Philadelphia blocks. The stoop's quiet now, the glow from kitchen windows fading as families drift off to sleep. Somewhere, a lone car rolls by, its tires whispering against the pavement. A light breeze moves through, carrying the faint scent of bread from the early morning bakers, a reminder that the city never truly stops breathing. Joey's story, like the streets that shaped it, is layered, part fact, part legend, part the things only he will ever know. It's the story of a man who learned early how to read a room, how to turn charm into currency, and how to move in ways that kept him standing when others fell. His path hasn't been clean, and it hasn't been easy, but it's been deliberate. And in a life where timing can mean everything, he's mastered the art of waiting for the right moment. Maybe that's why, decades after he first ran errands as a skinny kid on a corner, his name still drifts through the neighborhood like an echo. People tell stories, some true, some embroidered, and in the telling, they keep the skinny Don alive in the city's memory. Now the night belongs to the sleepers, the dreamers, and those still awake, thinking about the plays they'll make come morning. The hum of the fan, the softness of the pillow, the slow, steady breathing. Let it all pull you into that weightless drift. And as you fade into rest, hold on to that last image. A figure moving quietly down a South Philly street, the past behind him, the future waiting in the glow of the next street lamp.